What happens when a desire for lovemaking goes too far? For an answer, we all need to ask John Robinson. John Edward Robinson is a convicted American serial killer who murdered several women over a 15-year stretch. He later admitted involvement in 5 more murders committed during that same period. He is frequently referred to as the internet's first serial killer, seen as he communicated with the majority of his victims through online chat groups. Welcome back to Twisted Minds. My name is James, and today we have a tale of a criminal genius who pushed his luck too far. Stay with us as we unwind this case of the killer known as the Slavemaster. Robinson was the third of 5 children, born to an alcoholic father and a strict mother in Cicero, Illinois. He earned the rank of Eagle Scout in 1957 and reportedly traveled to London with a group of scouts who performed in front of Queen Elizabeth II. Later that year, he enrolled in Quigley Preparatory Seminary, a private school for boys in Chicago for aspiring priests, but walked out after 1 year, owing to behavioral concerns. After this, he enrolled at Morton Junior College in Cicero to become a medical X-ray technician, but left 2 years later. Despite the fact that he only stayed for 2 years and did not complete his training, he was able to secure a job as an X-ray technician at the Children's Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri, by falsifying credentials. Around the same time, at the age of 21, he married Nancy Jo Lynch, with whom he had a son and fraternal twins. After being fired for incompetence, Robinson took a similar job at a medical clinic, where he stole tens of thousands of dollars. While at this job, he had sexual relationships with both employees and patients. Robinson was arrested in 1969 for stealing more than $100,000 from his workplace, Fountain Plaza X-ray Laboratory. In August of that year, he was found guilty of embezzling $33,000 and sentenced to probation for 3 years. Robinson violated his probation in 1970 by returning to Chicago without the consent of his probation officer and taking a job as an insurance salesperson at R.B. Jones Company. Robinson established his own business in 1971 after numerous additional incidents of theft from employers, but he continued to forge documents to support his growing family. In 1971, he was arrested for the second time for embezzling from that firm and was returned to Kansas City, where his probation was extended. This reached a climax in 1975 when Robinson was discovered falsifying signatures and letters in order to claim thousands of dollars through a share swindle. However, a U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission investigation into Robinson's company resulted in a 4-count indictment for securities fraud, mail fraud, and false representation. Robinson was fined $2,500 and sentenced to 3 years on probation. During this time, Robinson developed and maintained the external impression of a likable, community-minded citizen and family man. He worked as a Slavemaster, baseball coach, and Sunday school instructor. In 1977, he charmed his way into the board of directors of a local philanthropic organization and produced a series of letters from his executive director to Kansas City's mayor, and from the mayor to other civic officials, praising his generous volunteer activities and generally singing his praises. He was eventually selected as the organization's Man of the Year, and he hosted a lavish awards luncheon in his honor. Robinson finally completed probation in 1979, but by 1980, he was arrested again on various offenses, including embezzlement and check fraud, for which he was sentenced to 60 days in jail in 1982. He set up a phony hydroponics company and duped a buddy out of $25,000 in hopes of making a quick profit to pay for his sick wife's medical care. He allegedly began seducing many of his neighbors' wives at this time, resulting in a fistfight with one of the husbands. He also joined the International Council of Masters, a secret sadomasochism cult, and became its slave master, whose duties included enticing victims to gatherings where they would be tortured and sexually violated by cult members. John's wrongdoings were only just beginning. Robinson hired Paula Godfrey, who was 19 at the time, as a sales representative in 1984, after establishing 2 more fraudulent shell businesses named EquiPlus and Equi2. At some point, Paula informed her friends and family that Robinson had ordered for her to be sent for training. Godfrey's parents filed a missing persons report after hearing nothing from her months later. Robinson was questioned by police and denied knowing where she was. Several days later, they received a typewritten letter with Godfrey's signature at the bottom. In the letter, She expressed gratitude for Robinson's assistance, stated that she was okay, and emphasized that she did not want her family to visit her. Because Godfrey was of legal age and there was no proof of wrongdoing, the investigation was closed. There has never been any trace of Paula Godfrey since then. Fast forward to 1985 when Robinson met a woman named Lisa Stazzi and her 4-month-old baby Tiffany in a battered women's shelter in Kansas City. He was under the alias John Osborne, and he offered her a job in Chicago, an apartment, and childcare for her baby in exchange for her signature on many sheets of blank stationery. Robinson phoned his brother and sister-in-law, who were unable to adopt a kid through standard methods, a few days later, and convinced them that he knew a baby whose mother had committed suicide. Don and Helen Robinson paid an imaginary lawyer $5,500 to get Tiffany Stazzi and a set of authentic-looking adoption papers with the falsified signatures of 2 lawyers and a judge. Lisa Stazzi was never seen or heard from again. 27-year-old Catherine Clampett left her child with her parents in Wichita Falls, Texas in 1987 and relocated to Kansas City in search of work. Robinson hired her, apparently promising her extended travel benefits and a new outfit. In June of that year, she mysteriously vanished. Her missing persons case is still ongoing. Robinson was in prison from 1987 to 1993, first in Kansas for repeated fraud convictions, and then in Missouri for another fraud conviction and parole violations. He met and befriended Beverly Bonner, the prison librarian at the Western Missouri Correctional Facility. After his release, she left her husband and traveled to Kansas to work for him. After Robinson arranged for her alimony checks to be rerouted to a Kansas post office box, Bonner's family never heard from her again. Bonner's mother continued to forward her checks for several years, and Robinson continued to cash them. Robinson had discovered the internet by this point and was scouring various social networking sites under the alias Slavemaster, looking for ladies who enjoyed playing the submissive partner role during intercourse. Sheila Faith, whose 15-year-old daughter Debbie was confined to a wheelchair due to spina bifida, was the first victim he encountered online. He pretended to be a wealthy man who would support them, pay for Debbie's rehabilitation, and provide Sheila with employment. They relocated from Fullerton, California to Kansas City in 1994 and then vanished. For the next 7 years, Robinson cashed Faith's pension checks. Robinson gradually rose to prominence in the increasingly popular BDSM online chat groups. In 1999, he offered a job and bondage relationship to Izabela Lewicka, a 21-year-old Polish immigrant living in Indiana. When she relocated to Kansas City, Robinson, who was still married, gave her an engagement ring and took her to the county registrar's office, where they paid for a marriage license that was never picked up. It's unclear whether Lewicka thought she and Robinson were married. She told her parents she had gotten married, but never gave them the name of her husband. During that period, she signed a 115-item slave contract that granted Robinson nearly complete authority over her life, including her bank accounts. She vanished in the summer of 1999. Robinson informed a web designer he hired that she had been deported after being found smoking marijuana. Around the time Lewicka vanished, Robinson persuaded Suzette Troughton, a lonesome nurse by day and subservient slave by night, to relocate from Michigan to Kansas so they could tour the world together. Suzette and John met in October 1999, and Robinson persuaded numerous colleagues to pretend as various members of his family in order to trap Suzette. Suzette accepted a job offer at the end of her 5-day stay in Kansas, and on February 14th, 2000, she relocated to Kansas to begin her new life. Suzette booked an apartment on Robinson's credit card for the following 2 weeks, and he paid regular visits, claiming that he needed to finalize some business arrangements before she could start her new job. During this time, they had frequent sex, and Suzette would send pictures of their intimacy to her friend, Crystal Ferguson. The emails between the two friends would continue long after Suzette's disappearance on March 1st. After that day, the tone of the communications abruptly altered. Suzette no longer discussed old friendships or life events. Everything she wrote would be about how wonderful her life is and how happy her boss and new master had made her. All of her emails were signed with the nickname Suze, which she never used. Crystal continued to receive emails from Suze, who explained that because her master was so good to her, she wanted Crystal to have a relationship like hers. Crystal was suspicious that the emails were not sent by her friend, so she decided to play along in order to uncover the culprit. JT, a man who advertised himself as a strict but fair master, soon contacted her. Crystal became aware that JT wrote in a similar email style to those from Sue's. After a few weeks of playing along with her master JT, Crystal began receiving phone calls from him, followed by emails from new acquaintances. A second man named Tom began emailing Crystal and promising to be her master, but she was suspicious once more. Tom handed Crystal a list of phone numbers where he could be reached at any moment. Crystal traced the numbers with the help of a cop friend, and each one led back to John Robinson. Troughton's mother received several typed letters reportedly mailed while the couple was away, despite the fact that the envelopes were stamped with Kansas City postmarks, and the writings were, according to her mother, usually error-free. Robinson later told Troughton's mother that she fled with an associate after stealing money from him. Robinson, like many other serial murderers, got increasingly sloppy over time, and his ability to hide his tracks declined. By 1999, he had caught the interest of police in both Kansas and Missouri, as his name appeared in an increasing number of missing persons cases. At 10:15 a.m. on Friday, June 2, 2000, two police knocked on the door of John Robinson Sr. and informed him that he was being arrested. He was later charged with aggravated sexual battery against two women. Nancy, his wife, would be brought in for interrogation, but she would have nothing to contribute to the investigation. The following day, a team of cops and forensic investigators arrived at Robinson's farm near Lacine. The deployment of cadaver dogs would immediately uncover 5 enormous metal barrels. When the first barrel was opened, it revealed a naked, blindfolded, and rotting body laying face down in the fetal position. A second barrel was opened, revealing yet another rotting body. The bodies were removed from the scene and transported to Dr. Donald Pojman's office for autopsy. Search warrants would be signed over the weekend authorizing a search of 2 storage lockers owned by Robinson in Missouri. On Monday, June 5th, the task team entered and opened locker number E2, discovering 3 barrels labeled rendered pork fat. An officer opened the first barrel and discovered, among other things, a shoe with a leg connected to it. The barrel was immediately resealed. All 3 barrels were sent to Dr. Thomas Young in Jackson County for autopsy. That afternoon, John Robinson appeared for the first time since the discoveries on his farm. Robinson, dressed in regular prison orange, appeared in Johnson County Courthouse, where he would learn that his bond had been raised to $5 million. District Attorney Chris Koster would declare at another press conference that each of the 3 barrels discovered in the storage locker contained a female body. Suzette Troughton, who had been missing since March 1st, 2000, was identified as one of the bodies discovered on that day. On June 12th, Beverly Bonner was identified as the first of 3 bodies discovered in the storage locker barrels. The following day, June 13th, John Robinson was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder for the bodies discovered in Kansas and Missouri. Robinson was officially charged in Johnson County District Court in Kansas with 2 charges of murder for the death of Suzette Troughton and Isabella Lewitzka, as well as Suzette's kidnapping. He was charged in Cass County with the deaths of Beverly Bonner and the 2 unidentified ladies discovered in the storage container. They would be confirmed as Sheila Faith and her crippled daughter Debbie by their dental records in late June. During his 3-week trial, prosecutors presented a pile of circumstantial and physical evidence, including fingerprints and blood, that linked Robinson to his alleged victims, sexually and otherwise. Robinson was given the death penalty in Kansas in 2002 for the murders of Troughton and Lewitzka, as well as life in prison for the murder of Stacey. Robinson was also dealing with a complicated legal situation in Missouri, where prosecutors were actively pushing more murder charges based on evidence uncovered there. Robinson's defense objected to his extradition because Missouri is significantly more aggressive in terms of capital punishment than Kansas, which had yet to execute anyone since reinstating the death penalty. The Missouri prosecutor Chris Koster insisted that Robinson lead authorities to the bodies of Lisa Stacey, Paula Godfrey, and Catherine Clampett as a condition of any plea bargain. Robinson refused because doing so would have represented an implied admission of guilt that may have been used against him in Kansas. Koster, on the other hand, was under pressure to reach an agreement because his case was not exactly cut and dry. Among other things, there was no conclusive evidence that any of the murders had occurred within Koster's jurisdiction. When it became evident that the women's bodies would never be discovered without Robinson's assistance, a sort of compromise was reached. Robinson confessed only to the fact that Koster had enough evidence to convict him of capital murder for the deaths of Godfrey, Clampett, Bonner, and the Faiths in a carefully prepared plea in October 2003. Though this statement was officially a guilt plea, and the Missouri court accepted it as such, it was noticeably devoid of any remorse. Currently, Robinson remains on death row in Kansas. Thanks for tuning in to Twisted Minds. That was the case of John Edward Robinson, and why don't you go ahead and click on one of the 2 videos on your screen for another one of our videos.